Thank you very much, Japanese American Citizen League Youth Council, for presenting the Vision Award to us. We are deeply honored and honestly surprised. We are accustomed to being stigmatized in society, especially by the Asian American community. We are used to hiding, thrown under the rug, and forgotten. So we sincerely thank you for honoring us today and helping us lift our voices. And thank you for that wonderful A.S.P.I.R.E. introduction, Kevin. It almost had everything. It stated our mission, what we stand for, our values, and what we do as an org. But I want to introduce you to the A.S.P.I.R.E. I know. This is Beatrice. She is an artist and a Pokemon master, as you can see, and a self-proclaimed introvert. But when it comes to injustice, she's one of the loudest and most passionate. This is Emmanuel. He is one of the most down-to-earth person you'll ever meet, who will sit in front of a deportation bus and risk felony charges for what he believes in. And if you are currently having a heartache, he will be the first person to take you in the nearest dessert place and feed you much-needed laughter. Last but not least, I want to introduce you to Dora. Her personality is as bright as the sun, and she is the best person to get arrested with. From experience. Because she brings in this very calm aura, and she was just there to help me. And these are just some of the people that makes A.S.P.I.R.E. what it is today. In many aspects, they're just like you, young people of color who are hungry for change. The difference between us is that we are labeled alien because we got caught up in an unjust system. We do have a couple of members who came through the border, the Canadian border. Many of us did come with visas, which easily got lost in the labyrinth called the immigration system. All of us have different stories, but from across the board, we weren't really conscious of our undocumented status until we were faced with roadblocks from every corner. From wanting to pursue higher education, to making a career, to building a lives for ourselves, for a future. Even the simple things become big obstacles. Imagine that right after your 16th birthday, instead of applying for a driver's license, despite proving how responsible you are, you're not allowed to. Imagine that you have been job hunting for more than 6 months. You are more than qualified for the jobs you are applying for, but a 9-digit number prohibits you from pursuing your dreams. Imagine an ocean between you and the people you love, never knowing if you'll ever see them again. Imagine that life is like that every day, full of endless possibilities that are ostensibly within reach, but are forbidden. On top of that, you always shoulder the fear of somebody taking a member of your family, your friends, including yourself. So you always have to make sure your fight or flight response is turned on. These are just some of the daily struggles we go through. In a country that loves to advocate for the good of the people, for liberty and justice for all, millions are still living in turmoil. Our textbooks teach us about the land of opportunity, but it hides the stories of oppression towards people of color, overshadowed by the glory of the United States of America. Our people's stories have shown us that the United States is a land of exclusion and injustice manifested in different forms. From the Chinese Exclusion Act to the Asian Pacific Bar, to the 110,000 Japanese Americans held in internment camps, to the 250,000 Asian Pacific Islanders being deported by the Obama administration alone, we continue to be excluded, enslaved, and oppressed. We saw in history the cycle of oppression, the persistence of white supremacy, of patriarchy, of racism, and the hyper-incarceration of people of color, and we continue to see it today. These systems of oppression are perpetuated by hegemony. Hegemony is so deeply interwoven into our society that they are what we considered as common sense. In this way, our consciousness must rise to question what is normal, to oppose our unknowing participation in this system of oppression. So when we speak out on our missing stories, we are challenging our consent in the system as we deconstruct the dominant narrative in the US national culture. When we engage in peaceful protest, we are challenging the violence or threats of violence to oppose our demands. When we collectively struggle together, we are challenging the system's means to keep our resistance within manageable reach. And one prevalent way that hegemony plays out in the Asian American community is through the social construction of model minority. This myth does its job by pitting us against each other and dividing our solidarity as people of color. In the 1960s Black freedom movement, people in power, namely white men, created this myth to blame minorities for their downward mobility and to make the majority of Asian Americans politically submissive. However, hegemony now comes in the form of increasingly clever disguises. Similarly, the model dreamers pursuing higher education are pitted against other immigrants and even their parents, who are blamed for bringing them here. In reality, the impact of model minority affects us all. The constant neglect of the government in our community's issues of poverty, of mental illness, of suicide, of drugs, educational attainment, and immigration. And in fact, these issues become shameful, skeletons in the closet that we'd rather forget existed. Model minority has led to our community's silence. Our story of rising up and speaking out is not part of the K-12 curriculum. How many of us here have learned of Asian American freedom fighters in public education? Of Fred Korematsu, of Yuri Kochiyama, of Larry Itliong, of Grace Lee Boggs. The power of hegemony repeats itself by covering up the stories of our heroes and sheroes, implicitly influencing the silence of our Asian American brothers and sisters. We become afraid and ashamed of speaking out about our own issues, let alone the injustices happening in our own community, because we were trained to think, it's my fault I'm suffering, but it's their fault they're struggling. Only I can help myself. If I work hard enough, I can also be successful. I can overcome anything. But we know better. We know that the political forces have external and internal influences in our lives, that the words illegal, Jap, FOB, foreigner, gook, all serve the same purpose of excluding our lived experiences. So it is our obligation to stand even when our legs shake. For real change to happen, we have to let our truth, our suffering speak even when our voices quiver. We must let those who experience it themselves speak and be heard. And if they are struggling to stand, we must hold them up, because we are all still struggling to stand. For me, one of the most difficult things to live with are the hateful words that I hear over and over again. It's like being bullied. Words find ways to infiltrate hearts and are always there to kick us back down when we're at our lowest. To give an example, a few years ago, my friend and I just finished watching a movie, and as we were eating dinner, the topic somehow went to immigration. So I tested the waters. Because she's Asian American, I asked her what her thoughts are about immigration. She told me point blank, illegals should just go back to their country. I didn't know how to respond to that because it seemed like she was attacking me. When someone you care for rejects an integral part of you, it becomes very difficult to face them afterwards. As if it wasn't enough that my future is so uncertain, but also people could hate me without really knowing who I am. I had very depressing thoughts. So like any normal person, I didn't talk about it. The constant feelings of shame, anxiety, and fear created a big barrier for many of us to advocate for ourselves. Breaking the silence about our immigration status is unthinkable because it is ingrained in our community for us to constantly hide. In Tagalog, the word for undocumented is PNP, or tago ng tago, meaning somebody who is always in hiding. I internalized this concept until about 3 years ago when I met with my counselor who referred me to A.S.P.I.R.E. We were all going through the same struggles, but they were not afraid to stand. They were the ones speaking up for me and saying all the things I've been wanting to say. I realized that right before me was a budding movement of thousands of young people fighting for our right to access higher education and pass pro-immigrant legislations that would decrease the fear in our communities. I didn't think that undocumented people, young people, can do that. They helped me transform my fear, my uncertainty, my shame as courage to speak out for my own dignity, for compassion, and for respect. In the 5 years that A.S.P.I.R.E. was created, we grew from a support system, support space, to standing on our own feet, challenging the oppression that terrorizes migrant communities and people of color. They showed me that our most powerful tool is our creative voices. And despite all the forces working against us, A.S.P.I.R.E., other undocumented APIs across the nation, together with our Latino brothers and sisters and our allies, continue to fight against the systems of oppression and injustice. We lead campaigns, hold actions, organize the immigrant population, inform the public about our truth, and empower our communities to fight with us for immigration rights and social justice. In the history of oppressed and marginalized people in this country, no victory has come about without the people organizing together in the community. The civil rights movement, the labor movement, the women's movement, all came about because people banded together to fight for what they know is right, to fight for what they needed. Instead of being subservient and yielding to the people of power, we see time and time again that the power of the people is stronger and more fierce. The generation before us have made great strides in advancing our liberation, but our fight is not finished. We must continue to advance their gains. We continue to struggle as people of color, as women, as LGBTQ individuals, and as immigrants. But we struggle together. As such, everyone in this room and the API community need to continue to work collectively to fight for a society that treats all its members justly and humanely. Like Yuriko Chiyama and many other leaders in the movement, we were not born activists. We chose the path of social justice because we were impacted ourselves and saw the injustices happening on a daily basis. We need to break down the capitalist mindset of individualism and change to a united front of collective leadership in which ordinary people like us can become leaders and speak out our truth and seek systematic change. That's the impact and legacy we want to leave, not just through the undocumented movement, but through the intersectionalities of our struggle to have a holistic movement of all people towards freedom and liberation. Thank you.
I hope nobody